Hollywood, here we come.
The time is done.
Folks, my name is David Cobb. I like to say that I am a proud, I am a patriotic, and these days I'm a pissed off American citizen. Yeah, right? And I'm not joking, I am pissed off. And I'm mad because the country that I was told that we had in the United States of America is not the country that we have. And that makes me angry, but I want to be clear, the anger that I'm feeling is a righteous anger. See, if you get angry because you don't get your way, that's not righteous. Righteous anger requires that the reason you're angry is about injustice and oppression. But even deeper, you have to act on it. Because even if you get mad at injustice and oppression and all you do is stew and wallow in it, that's not righteous either. Righteous anger requires that you act against the injustice and for justice. Saying it that way, righteous anger is a good thing. The abolitionist movement, the women's suffrage movement, the civil rights movement, every great social movement is actually provoked by righteous anger and injustice. And even deeper, by engaging in that action, you discover joy. And you can transform that anger and actually make it a productive emotion. You don't have to stay in that angry state. It actually becomes a joyful experience. So righteous anger is a wonderful thing. And that being the case, I said that I was angry about the fact that we don't live in the country that I thought that we had. And I mean that because I was taught that we live in the United States of America, a country that is based on liberty, justice, and equality. And the reality is, the way our social, political, and economic institutions work, not only do we not facilitate liberty, justice, and equality, most of our social, political, and economic institutions actually affirmatively work against it. How did that happen? Well, I'm going to tell a story about how it came to be that large transnational corporations are not just exercising power. I'm going to tell a story on how it came to be that large transnational corporations are ruling us. As surely as masters once ruled slaves, as surely as kings once ruled subjects, unelected and unaccountable corporate CEOs are ruling us because they're making the decisions. They're deciding how much poison will be in our air and water, what your transportation choices are going to be, what your health care will be or not be for many of us. Corporate CEOs decide whether to take this country into war. And we, the people, are left to choose between paper or plastic at the grocery store. Right? We get to choose between Coke and Pepsi. We get, we get inconsequential material consumer choices, but we almost never get the opportunity to meaningfully participate in the decisions that actually affect our lives. And as I tell this story, I'm going to make sure to cover these 4 concepts together. The first concept is the word democracy. That word gets tossed around a lot in this country, so let's make sure we've got some common understanding. From what language does the word democracy derive? It's Greek. Let's break it down. Demos means
People.
the people. Kratia means rule. So literally the word democracy means the people rule. Pop quiz. How many of y'all believe we the people are ruling in the United States? Don't be shy. No hands, right? I do this presentation all across the country. 150 this year. I ask that question everywhere I go. Nobody raises their hand. That's a problem. But saying it another way, I think it's a good thing. What? It's not a good thing that the people don't rule. It's a good thing that nobody's raising their hands to that question anymore. I think it's a good thing that we are being courageous enough to confront a very disturbing reality. That notwithstanding what we were taught as children, the United States of America is not a functioning democracy. The people don't rule. In fact, this is a plutocracy, ruled by the few. In fact, some of us have taken to describing that plutocracy in a very, very effective, dynamic way. What's that? The 1%.
Yeah.
What is that chant? We are the 99%, except for to point out that 1% are actually ruling us. So it's a good thing that we are living in a time where more and more ordinary Americans are confronting a very difficult reality. That brings me to the next topic, which is sovereignty. Friends, if I just had the word the sovereign on the board, who or what would you think of? Quick, the sovereign. King. I bet most of you all thought of the king, right? That's because sovereignty means the authority to rule. And 500 years ago, the king was the sovereign. The sovereign was the king. Those words were literally synonymous. And where did the king claim his authority to rule? God. You don't get more legitimate. Right? That's a big deal. If God is giving you the power to rule, that is a big deal. And I do want to point out that this notion of the king having divine right, that was cultural reality at the time. Honestly, how many of y'all think that that's a good idea? How many of y'all have even considered in any time in your life, you know what, we ought to have a king who speaks for the divine right? Like, anybody?
When I want to be a princess, but...
Nicely done. All I'm pointing out is that we can't even honestly wrap our heads around that idea because it seems foolish and ridiculous. And 500 years ago, that was reality. The point I'm making is, when people tell me, oh, you can't amend the Constitution, that's too hard. We'll never do that. I think, have you not been paying attention throughout all of world history, throughout all of U.S. history? Profound changes have been made. Not just policy changes. Yes, many policy changes have been made. But deeper still, systemic, structural changes have been made when ordinary people put their shoulder to the wheel of change. And another way to say it is, and y'all get ready because the Texan gonna get metaphysical on y'all. Are you ready? We're all individually participating in creating our shared collective reality. Another way to say that is, if enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true, it's true. That's how reality works. So if it is true that the United States of America is a fundamentally racist, sexist, and class-oppressive society, and it is true, then I suggest we should start thinking and acting differently. Maybe we should start thinking and acting like we're in a crisis. You know why I think we should start thinking and acting like we're in a crisis? Because we're in a crisis, y'all! We are. It's an ecological crisis. It's an economic crisis. It's a social justice crisis. In fact, it is a series of crises that are cascading down amongst us. It is interrelated, but I don't want you to get freaked out or feel negative or scared, because I want to remind you, in the Chinese language, they use symbols for words. And in the Chinese language, the symbol for crisis is also the symbol for another word. Opportunity, Deb. I genuinely believe that the crisis that we're facing now is, yes, it's scary, but it's also providing us with an opportunity to make cultural, transformational change that would have been impossible before people were beginning to realize this crisis was had. And that brings me to the next topic, which is legal personhood. Please note I did not write corporate personhood on the board. That's because legal personhood means the ability to assert rights. And since we're talking about legal personhood, I mean literally the ability to assert rights under law. And saying it that way, I hope you see that this is not just a philosophical question. This is not a legal technicality. This has been a fundamental question that has had to be asked and had to be answered by every social movement in this country. Saying it another way, when you think about it, from the American Revolution to the women's suffrage movement, to the abolitionist movement, to the civil rights movement, the trade union movement, every single one of these movements at its core was about who had the ability to assert rights, who had the power to do that. And that is something that we should be thinking about today as we embark upon the next stage of this movement. And the last concept on the board is the word corporation. Since that word is equally important, I'll ask the same question. From what language does the word corporation derive?
Latin.
It's Latin. Let's break it down. Corpus? Body. Corpus means body. And the suffix tion in Latin means to have or create, or the quality of. So the word corporation literally means to have or create body. And by body in this sense, I mean literally physical body. And that's because in law school we're taught, any lawyers in the crowd besides me that would admit it? I'll just tell you, in law school we're taught that a corporation is a legal fiction. In fact, even if you weren't subjected to law school, if you've heard that phrase, even if you couldn't precisely define it, but if you just heard that a corporation is a legal fiction, raise your hand, for real. Look, almost every hand goes up. All of you have heard corporation legal fiction, corporation legal fiction, corporation legal fiction, corporation legal fiction. My friends, that begs the question, what does the word fiction mean? Not real, made up. Right? I was taught in law school that a corporation doesn't actually exist in the real world. You know, reality? It's an abstraction. It's a construction. And we will pretend like this group of people, and more importantly, the material and the resources and the contractual obligations they make and the cultural assumptions and the political cultural reality. It's a very sophisticated, complex concept and an abstraction, but we construct it, and we do that so that we can treat it a certain way under law. And remember, if enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true, it's true. Corporations may not exist in the real world, but we construct it and make them real. That is important. And the word corporation comes from Latin because we're doing a recording. Can I go through this and then we'll do the discussion later? Yeah. Thank you. Can you edit that or should I go back?
Oh, I can help you.
Got it? So that the word corporation comes from Latin because the first corporations ever created by the genius of creative, clever human beings were created during the Roman Republic. Not, by the way, during the Roman Empire. And sometimes I wish we would spend more time asking, what happens when a republic devolves into an empire? Because that might be an important conversation. Just think about it. But here's the thing. Those Romans constructed the concept of the corporation for a reason. For example, how many people here have either said or heard the phrase, all roads lead to Rome? Every hand goes up, right? We've all said that or heard it said, right? 2,000 years later, we still say it. Check it out. That road system was built and designed as and by a Roman corporation. Likewise, the aqueduct system, that amazing bit of engineering that's moving water all across the Italian peninsula without electricity. Look how clever humans are. One of the things that fills me with such great optimism is the absolute knowledge that we can solve every problem that faces us if we only have the political will and the political power to implement the solutions that already exist. But that aqueduct system, corporation. Likewise, the first universities and the first hospitals in Rome. Can you guess? Corporation, corporation. So a quick pop quiz. What does a road system, a water system, a university, a hospital, what do they all have in common? They are corporations. What kind? What do they do?
Non-profit.
They're all public, right? Everything I just described is a public process or a public project. The genius of the corporation is to take private money and material and put it to a public use, but not in a mandatory way the way taxes are. The genius of the concept of the corporation was that you allow it to happen in a voluntary way, either by a donation, which could be a nonprofit in today's sense, but also it's voluntary to say, if you invest in this effort, we expect to make money and we'll return profits to you, a return on your investment, right? So it might be a for-profit corporation, but at its core, every single original corporation followed this model. I want to be clear, David Cobb is not anti-corporation. The Move to Amend Coalition is not anti-corporation. Corporations can and have and still are sometimes very effective ways to organize things. Good things can come of them. Bad things can come of them too. But the thing is, it's still just an instrument of society. I also want to point something out though. This is not exactly how the modern transnational corporation is operating, is it? It's because the modern corporation actually comes out of the 14th and 15th century of Europe. You know, the age of discovery. I have to put discovery in quotation marks because, after all, what did the Europeans discover in the 14th and 15th century? Africa, Asia, later North and South America. Newsflash. There were people living there. They weren't lost. They weren't discovered, and so instead, with the same level of courage that we talked about the lack of democracy in this country, let's confront that history with courage and acknowledge it's actually the age of rape and pillage and plunder and murder. For me, there's one word that sums it up. That is the age of empire. And imperialism is brutal. Imperialism is ugly. That's what it means. Empire, we should not sugarcoat what imperialism really means. And get this, The modern transnational corporation didn't just accidentally spring up during the age of European empire. The modern transnational corporation, when it was first created, was created and called a joint stock company. And the joint stock company was created as an intentional, deliberate instrument of empire. For example, one of the most famous of those joint stock companies was the East India Company, literally designed to destroy and kill Indians and militarily conquer them, then to colonize their minds, and then to force those people to work and labor to steal the resources from their own land and send that wealth back to the shareholders of the East India Company as profit. It was a business model. So too the Africa Trading Company, a joint stock company, which was at the core of the depraved institution of slavery and treating people as a commodity to be bought and paid for, right? These were the ways in which it operated. And since I'm telling a quick little story, and it's an American story, I want to now bring us to the founding of the United States of America with this question. How many colonies in the founding of the United States? 13. Folks, everybody knows this. How many colonies? 13. 13, right? So since that question is so easy, here's my real question. How many of those 13 colonies were corporations?
Oh gosh, probably all of them.
How about that? It was a trick question. The answer, all of them. Because the word corporation means to have or create body. Well, it took the king to create each one of those. And the king created the corporation, or created the charter of the corporation by the use of the legal instrument called a charter. And to illustrate how the king creates a colony by the use of a charter, I'm going to do a quick little exercise or tell a quick little story. In this story, I'll be the king. Why do y'all think I get to be the king in this story?
White male.
That's one of them. She said I'm white and male, but there are other white males in this room. Why does this white male get to be the king?
You're a lawyer.
Also important, deeper still, because I'm telling the story. The point is, I want you to recognize that in every story there's a storyteller, and in our culture we should ask who's telling these stories and why, because it matters. And in this story, I'll be the king, and now using nothing but a writing instrument and the political power that I have, I will create Massachusetts. But I'm not going to bother with the day-to-day affairs of administering Massachusetts. After all, I'm the king. I've got other people to rape and pillage. And so I will create Massachusetts, but now I will immediately, in the original charter that created Massachusetts, will create the position and assign a person to be the royal governor of Massachusetts. And now, my friends, I will quote from the actual original charter that created Massachusetts. I, the king, create Massachusetts. I assign a royal governor and task that royal governor with the legal responsibility, and here comes the quote, quote, to plant, to rule, and to govern this new area that I have created to benefit me, the king, but also to benefit the other shareholders of the joint stock company known as the Massachusetts Bay Trading Company. Massachusetts began as a for-profit corporation on the same business model as the East India Company, as an empire. So too was it the Providence and Rhode Island plantation. Virginia was not the state of Virginia. You know what it was? Not the Commonwealth. That was a trick question too. Virginia actually began its birth as the Virginia Company. How about that? And Georgia was a penal corporation. Anybody know what skin color the original slaves had who worked Georgia's original colony? White. How about that? Here's something, y'all. White people have got to understand that race got created not just to justify slavery, but to confuse white people. To confuse working class white people. Because here's how it works. I'm working class and I'm white. The boss man has his boot on my neck. I'm being exploited and oppressed. I hate it. This sucks. least I'm white. Telling you, race is a construct as surely as the word corporation is a construct. We created it. It doesn't actually even exist. And the reason the ruling elite created it was to confuse us so that we wouldn't see past something as trivial as pigment, because that's all it really is. Pigment means nothing. Sure, ethnicity and culture, there are differences that do matter, but skin color ain't one of them. Right? The only reason it's been made such a big deal is because the ruling elite have been able to confuse white people, and frankly, a lot of our sisters and brothers are deeply confused. And we got to find ways to educate them and recognize that really the problem is that there's a small ruling elite, or a 1%, most of whom do happen to be white, but not all of them. But most of them are, right? But that whiteness is actually something that gives us a certain skin privilege, but that skin privilege will also not let you in to the 1%'s reindeer games either. It's a very difficult thing, this notion of race. But I want to actually point something out, my friends, that if it is true, and it is true, that the royal governor was administering the colony of Massachusetts just as the royal governor administered Georgia and every other colony, let's point out that in today's terminology, we would not call such a person a royal governor. What word would we use to describe that person?
CEO.
A CEO. Another point I'm making is the American Revolution is not merely a rejection of monarchy as a form of rule, but the American Revolution is a people's uprising against corporate rule. It is actually an uprising against the royal governors and the whole corporate system itself. In fact, the Boston Tea Party is very illustrative. Do y'all think that in the Boston Tea Party that they threw all the tea in the harbor that night? They didn't. Tell us, what tea was thrown in the harbor?
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of the company, but it was the local company.
It was only one company. The East India Company was the only tea thrown in the harbor that night because of the laws that had been passed. Frankly, the Boston Tea Party is an act of nonviolent civil disobedience targeting a specific corporation because of its roles and ties to government, and nonviolent civil disobedience that resulted in property damage to corporations worth about $1 to $2 million in today's time. Sometimes I wish the modern Tea Party movement would do a little more history than really understand what it is that they're celebrating. They're celebrating nonviolent civil disobedience. Another way to say it is that the American revolutionaries were not calling for a more socially responsible king or more socially responsible CEOs. Maybe today we could do more than just beg for more socially responsible CEOs. Maybe we could actually have the courage to be for what we're for. Maybe, because think about it, is our demand really, we want the British Petroleum Corporation to not kill the entire Gulf of Mexico. Please do a little less ecological damage. Massey Coal Corporation, would you please not kill quite so many coal miners? Duke Energy, would you please not be quite so offensive? See, the point is that if we were to start thinking of ourselves in the historic legacy, we might actually think and act differently. And in the American Revolution, of course, we know that the revolutionaries won. And because the American revolutionaries won, a new charter gets created. That new charter is created in order to describe and create the entire political and legal framework. It's sometimes known as the supreme law of the land. What's that document called? The U.S. Constitution. How many of y'all have read the Constitution? Be honest. A lot of hands go up. So y'all grade my papers. See if I get this more or less correct. I'll tell you, when you read the Constitution in its entirety, you'll see two actors. In other words, when I say in its entirety, I mean to do like my mama taught me. Look for patterns. Look for systems. Don't just read individual words. Try to see how everything fits together. When you do that with the Constitution, you'll see two actors. The first actor is the most important actor. In fact, it's so important, it's the first three words.
The people.
All I ever have to do is put my hand to my ears. People will say in unison, we the people. It's because we the people are hallowed words, but we the people come together to create the second actor, which is government itself. Properly understood, we the people are real in the physical world, Government is a construct too. We construct it. We're constructing it right now. Something to think about. Look how much power we have collectively if we just exercise it collectively. We, the people, in this document are described as free and sovereign. What does the word sovereign mean again?
Rule.
Authority to rule. We, the people, are sovereign. The king isn't sovereign anymore. We kicked his butt out. But check this out. Government isn't sovereign either. Government doesn't have the authority to rule us. Government is subordinate and accountable. Government is subordinate to whom? The people. Government is accountable to whom? We the people. That's got a ring to it, doesn't it? I like how this is going. Let's continue. We the people are free and sovereign because we the people have rights. Government does not have rights. Government only has duties. My friends, I want to stop for a moment and underscore as a lawyer how important that is. If I have the right to do something, it means I can do it. I have to go to the city council here in Greenville and ask permission. I don't have to go to the South Carolina legislature to get permission. Thank goodness with your crazy-ass legislature. I don't have to go to the U.S. Congress and get permission. Man, I'm from Texas. I don't need my mama's permission. Well, legally I don't. I mean, culturally it might be different. Y'all got the same thing going, I think, here, right? Mama culture is strong here. But the point is, legally, if you have the right to do something, you don't need anybody's permission. And get this, not only do you not need advance permission, but if any government at the local, county, state, or even federal level tries to pass a law that infringes upon my rights or your rights, we should be able to go into court and have that law overturned. Constitutional rights are sacred. They're not dependent upon the majority. This is a very amazing thing. And duties are different. Duties are legal responsibilities. And the people have rights, government has duties, and government never has rights over the people. Government only has duties to the people. And where do those duties come from? Well, remember, all power resides with the people. Power to the people is not just a Black Panther Party chant, although it is. It's also a deeper awareness and understanding that the people hold the power. In fact, Thomas Jefferson said, no government is legitimate except that government that has the consent of the governed. Sometimes I think we should spend some time asking, how can we affirmatively withdraw our consent from this current system? That would be a different way of thinking about how we go about our work. We do not consent to the racist, sexist, and class oppressive society. We do not consent to the destruction of Mother Earth. We do not consent to the wars of empire being waged allegedly in our name. Not for me. Don't you do it. Just something else to think about. But here's the thing. If it's true that the people have all the power, then let me ask this quick little pop quiz. What is the population, more or less, of the municipality of Greenville?
300,000.
That's the county.
That's the county, probably.
50,000.
50,000. Let's say 55,000 more or less in Greenville, because I want to do the city. I will celebrate that 55,000 people have all the political power in Greenville, but I'll tell you this, I don't want to go to a meeting of 55,000 people where we decide where should stop signs go in our city. And I like political meetings. I'm not going to that one. Now imagine, what do y'all got, about 3 million people in South Carolina?
About 4, I think. Yeah.
About 4 million?
Something in that range.
Can you imagine 4 million people coming together to make state public laws? Now imagine 300 million Americans coming together to make federal laws. It's insanity, right? The point is, yes, the people do have all the political power, but in our system, we delegate a certain amount of power to government. Do we, the people, delegate all our power to government? Hell no. We only delegate enough power to government to perform the duties that we, the people, have told them to do. That, my friends, is what is known as limited government. Have y'all heard that phrase? Limited government means, in essence, that government is limited in its power only to perform the duties that we, the people, have told them to do. And how does government perform those duties? By writing laws in the public interest. At the local level, they're called ordinances. At the state level, they're called laws. At the federal level, they're called congressional laws, right? And here's the thing. There's going to be debate about what those public laws should be. And there should be. But you know what, folks? I feel young to say, I remember when, but I remember when you could have fierce political debate and disagreement with somebody and still be civil. I remember that. In fact, I remember Mr. Barry, our next door neighbor, and my daddy having what I thought as a little boy was they were going to come to blows, I thought. It seemed like a knockdown, drag-out fight, and it was about politics. And at the end of it, my daddy said, Barry, you old coot, you're a loon, but I'll see you at the game. Have a good day. And they shook hands. That meant something. That told me something. And honestly, folks, I think we've lost something in this country by not being able to have the fierce political debate. We should have fierce debate. We should have passion, right? I'm not saying not to be passionate. I hope you can tell I've got passion for my politics. But we have to learn to be able to disagree agreeably, to actually be able to flesh this out, right? And yes, there's going to be disagreements, but when a public process comes up with a public law, that law is the law of the land. However, remember this, no public law can actually violate the private rights, the constitutional rights of any of the people. The difference between private and public is very important. Holy smokes, watch this. Now that we've laid this all out, in 90 seconds I'm going to describe to you now how our U.S. Constitution is supposed to operate, how this government is supposed to operate according to the creation myth that we were told. Y'all ready? Go. In the U.S. Constitution, we the people are free and sovereign because we have all the power. We have the authority to rule, but we delegate a certain amount of our power to government. Government which will be held subordinate and accountable to we the people, and we will task government, local, state, and federal, with the duty to write laws and legislate in the public interest. But the one thing that no law can do, whether you like that law or hate that law, it's a legitimate law, except for when that law violates the private rights of the free and sovereign people who live there. Ta-da! Isn't that amazing? Right? I mean, this is brilliant, I think. Our individual rights are supposed to be protected, but we have a public communitarian process for how those laws are to be created. This is genius. This is fantastic. We should try that in this country. This would work. And I'm not even joking. This is genius, and I'm also not joking that we've never tried. Because before I go 1 second further waxing poetic about the brilliance of the Constitution, a quick time out to ask, in what year is the Constitution ratified and become the supreme law of the land?
1792.
It's you're thinking of the Bill of Rights? I'll just tell you, the Constitutional Convention is 1787, but 1789 is the year that the Constitution gets ratified and actually becomes the supreme law of the land. The reason I want 1789 on the board is so that I can now ask, so when this country is actually founded as the United States of America, who is part of we the people? Who can assert rights?
Property white males.
What?
With land.
Well, how about that? That's a lot of restrictions. You have to be white or you're not a person. But being white is not enough. You have to be a white man. And even being a white man is not enough, because if you're poor or working class or an indentured servant, you don't have rights either. Only wealthy white men with property could assert rights. You know what percentage of the adult human beings living in 1789 in the United States of America were actually legal persons? What percentage?
1%.
1%. That's great. Listen, it's a great meme. I love the 1%. But y'all don't be so cynical. It's not 1%. It's 5%. Think about it. That means 95% of the adult human beings were not legally persons who could assert rights. Another way to say it is how the late, great Howard Zinn said it, and may the goddess rest his soul. He said, the entire history of the United States can be summed up as a series of struggles by actual human beings to be defined as persons with rights under our Constitution. That's so important. I'm going to say it again. The whole history of our country, in essence, has been a series of different struggles by actual human beings to be able to define as persons with rights under our Constitution. So now that we've got this framework up, I've got to ask, that make sense? Y'all see the brilliance of both civil liberties and libertarians and communitarians in a public process? There's a balance here, and it's a beautiful, delicate balance as the way it's supposed to operate. But here's the thing, folks. It's not working because of the operation of the most dominant institution on planet Earth, the most dominant institution in our politics, in our economics, in our culture, the corporation. So let's put the corporation on the board, but before I do, let me ask, what does it take to form a corporation in South Carolina today?
A lawyer, money.
You don't need the lawyer if you do it yourself. You need $150,
Okay.
and you got to fill out some paperwork. And as long as you fill it out correctly, dot the I's, cross the T, and your paperwork clears, your check clears, you know what the Secretary of State will issue you? A charter. A charter is created. It's the birth certificate for the corporation. You know how long your corporation can last?
Indefinitely, right?
Forever.
Yeah.
You know what you can do with a corporation according to South Carolina corporation law today? Anything legally permissible, all lawful activities. That's what it says. Apparently you can do illegal things if you have enough money. But the point is that we don't even really think of this construct as the corporation. We act as if there's nothing that we can do about it. We act as if it is given to us from God on high. We act as if it's inevitable, but it's not. Because now I'm going to take you back to 1789 and tell you what it once took to form a corporation in every state in the Union, and was still the case for the next 75 years. First, you had to prove that there was a public need that was not being met in your application. You had to prove that there's some public need that businesses that don't have a corporation were not meeting. But that's not good enough, because your application has to go to the State House of Representatives, where it's debated and voted on, and you have to get a majority vote. And even if that happens, you're not through, because now your application goes to the State Senate, and it gets debated and voted on. And you have to get a majority vote. And even if you get that majority vote, you're still not through, because now your application goes to the governor, who has to be willing to sign it. Does that sound anything like a corporate charter today? Of course not. What did I just describe?
$150.
Say it loud.
Law.
I've described the lawmaking process. Anybody besides me work to pass a law, get a law lobby to get it passed? How hard is that? It's crazy hard, right? The point is, it was once as politically controlled to get limited liability incorporation as it is to get a law passed. And get this, if you were granted the privilege, not the right. Incorporation is not a right, it's a legal privilege. In order to get that privilege, if you were granted it, all you could do was the specific public thing that you had said that you would do. And if you did any other type of business, you know what happened to your corporate charter? Revoked. It was dismissed. It was revoked. Corporate charters were revoked for going ultra vires, or beyond the authority of why it had been issued. Because the idea of limiting liability was limiting legal responsibility, and the founders thought that should be done in a very controlled way. They believed in responsibility. They believed in responsibility. Now, my friends, I'm still not through, because I have to ask you, you know how long those corporate charters lasted then? 5 years, 10 years, not a single corporate charter ever lasted more than 20 years. At the end of that time period, they automatically dissolved. And the business could continue, but not limited liability. If you wanted limited liability, you had to reapply all over again. And so, my friends, even if you were limited, even if you were operating within that limited time period, right, in time, even if you were doing the specific thing that you had been granted your corporate charter to do, if you ever did anything that violated the public interest, do you know what happened to your corporate charter? Revoked. Corporate charters were routinely revoked for merely acting outside the public interest. Now, I'm not suggesting this is the land of milk and honey. After all, slavery existed. The patriarchy was oppressing women. Working class folks were systematically oppressed and exploited, but what I am saying is that the corporation as an instrument was appropriately, politically, and democratically controlled. So now that we know that it takes an action of state government to issue a charter, we know that the corporate charter can hold the corporation subordinate and accountable. We know that the corporate charter describes the duties of what a corporation can or cannot do. We understand that the corporation should only be allowed to exist if it serves the public interest. Isn't it obvious that a corporation should be here under the appropriate democratic control of our government and of our representative form? Well, now, folks, thank you for your patience, because here comes the punchline. When the U.S. Supreme Court in an act of supreme judicial activism, by the way, comes waltzing in and says, we're going to tell you, correction, 5 people are going to tell 300 million Americans, we're just going to assert that you have to treat a corporation as if it's a person with rights. It perverts the whole framework. See, corporate personhood is the idea that a corporation must be treated under law as if it's a person with constitutional rights. And that, my friends, is utterly and completely illogical. But it's not just illogical. Treating a corporation as if it's a person with constitutional rights is stupid. And not only that, let's just be honest, treating a corporation as if it's a person with constitutional right steals our sacred right to self-government. It allows the ruling elite to completely control in every way not only the election process, but also the legal process. And what pisses me off as a lawyer, not only have they stolen our sacred right to self-government, but they legalize the theft and tell us we have to accept it, and that there's nothing we can do about it. Well, I say, ya basta. Enough already. There is damn sure something that we can do about it. We got to do what people before us have done. We got to educate, we got to agitate, we got to organize, we got to build a movement that will be so loud, that will be so powerful that we will literally overgrow not only the culture, or not only the politics, but the culture itself. We got to act like we are the free and sovereign people that we are. And I honestly think there are lots of movements going on in this country, and I'm proud of that. I'm here representing what I think is probably one of the most exciting ones, and it's called Move to Amend. Amend what? Why, the U.S. Constitution. And that amendment has 2 demands. The first demand is very clear, it's very simple, and it's very important. Number 1, we must abolish in its entirety the idea that a corporation is a person with rights. A corporation is an artificial entity created. It has legal privileges, but not rights. And the difference is important. See, a privilege is something that can be granted or taken away. A right is something you have because you're a human being. They are inherent, inalienable. They cannot be taken away. They are not dependent upon the body politic or the majority. That's an important thing. And may I point out that that means that only human beings have constitutional rights. It means that for-profit corporations do not have rights, and neither do non-profits. They're also artificial entities. Because let's face it, folks, that's intellectually honest, right? You can't say, let's have a system where the corporations I like get constitutional rights, but the corporations I don't like don't have constitutional rights. Second thing is, we'll never build a movement with principled conservatives whom we need if we're not going to actually make that distinction. And the third thing is, let's remember, if we say that non-profit corporations have constitutional rights, don't you see that the ruling elite will just make a bunch of non-profits and completely subvert everything? You know, non-profits like the Chamber of Commerce or the Heritage Foundation or the Cato Institute or Freedom Works or Citizens United, which was a non-profit, right? So we have to abolish in its entirety the idea that a corporation has constitutional rights. The second thing we have to do is to abolish the equally odious, also court-created idea that money equals speech. Money is not speech, it's property. Money can be regulated in the political process to protect the integrity of the political process. This idea was created by the court as late as 1976. It's a new idea. And before the court did that, did you know that it was it was a actual felony in most states to either give corporate money to elections or to use your corporate treasury to even influence elections? Look at how low we've sunk, that now not only are we giving rights to corporations, but we're saying that the wealthy can spend unlimited amounts of money and that corporate dollars can be used, and even foreign corporations can spend money in our elections now. So this is the demand of Move to Amend, and at this point, I want to do 2 things. One, I'm going to pass around an opportunity for you to join this movement. Now, I know you're already signed up, so I'm going to start here. And as this comes around, this is a petition, but it's not a petition we're going to submit on bended knee to any elected official. That's an organizing petition. And by that I mean, if you sign up, and I certainly hope you will, I hope you'll sign up. What that means, my friends, if you sign up, we're going to contact you. Yes, we're going to contact you. We're going to contact you, and we want to be in touch with you. So please do. Look, if you don't want to join this movement, then don't. That's okay. Just pass the petition. I won't be offended. I mean, I'll be surprised, but I won't be offended. But if you are going to join this movement, and if you are going to sign up, print legibly.
Will you identify where the email is from? Because
Yes.
it gets kicked out. I have
Move to
check
amend.
closely. Okay.
Yes, move to amend. It'll show up always. So the point is, folks, as that comes around, I hope you'll join. And as before we open it up for questions or comments, I want to point this out. As I gave this presentation, I told you I was going to tell a story. And now I want to ask you, is this story a story that only progressives could hear? Or is this a story that you think conservatives could hear, and principled folks who may disagree? And the reason I say that is I've traveled this country. I've given this presentation at Occupy encampments. And you know what? At Occupy, I get applause, I get laughs, and I've also given this presentation at Tea Party gatherings. And guess what? I get applause and I get laughs. The only difference is the applause and laughs come in different places. The point is, if we learn how to tell this story in a respectful way, we can find that there's a lot of common ground about how our society ought to be organized. So at this point, I'm going to, and we're going to finish up. You can, if anybody doesn't want to be recorded, do you want to record the discussion or just this part?
That's up to Eric, really.
Eric, what?
We're good.
Okay, so let me finish up and say I want to thank everybody who came here. Thank you so much for being here. Now, I want to address whoever's watching this. And I just want to say, if you're watching me right now, let's just acknowledge that the only reason that you're seeing this is because of non-corporately filtered media. People's media. What's your name behind the camera?
Jonathan.
Jonathan, because Jonathan is actually investing in helping to create content as a citizen and then posting it wherever it is that you're seeing it, because this is how people's media is operating. This is actually an effort to communicate with each other. So however you're seeing this, remember that. Support whatever this people's media platform is. We need a movement. So you didn't get a chance to sign up, so go to the website www.movetoamend.org, and if this is actually working well, somewhere about right here in the screen should be the words www.movetoamend.org. Go to that website, sign up so that we can be in touch with you. Peace.